Okay, this is going to be feedback on the population assessment test. And I'm going to give you some feedback on each of the 4 questions that you will have answered. Now, what you will write might have differed from my advice, but what you should do is compare my comments against what you wrote and determine whether you think you achieved what I suggest you should have been doing in your answer. And if you haven't, then on the feedback document, I'd like to write a comment on what you wrote for each of them. Even if the comment is my answer was very good and there was nothing more I should have added. But if there's anything that I'm suggesting you should have done which you didn't do, or something you did that I'm suggesting you shouldn't have done, even if you get full marks, then make sure you write that comment in your feedback. So let's have a look at question 1. So we have a country, Kenya, and it's got a population pyramid that clearly indicates that this is a developing country. It tells us in the question that it is a typical population structure for a developing country. Now, this is an explain question, so you're not being asked to use any data from the graph to describe the different age groups. You're being asked to give reasons for that. And your answer should focus on a mixture of reasons that explain why there are lots of people in the young age group. Basically, you're telling me why are birth rates high, and why are there very few people in the old age group? So what you're doing there is you're telling me why are life expectancies low or why are death rates high. Your answer should have at least 6 reasons, but I would always recommend that you try to have a 7th reason in a good answer, because what it means is if one of your ideas is a repeat or isn't properly made, then you'll still be able to get full marks. So you'd be looking at birth rates in Kenya being high because children are needed to work on the family farm, so people have lots of children because there aren't any pensions, so people have lots of children to guarantee that the children are there to look after them in their old age. There is a lack of education in Kenya, so people don't know how to stop having lots of children. Also, there's little access to contraception, so once again, people don't know how to prevent having children. Religion and culture in a country like Kenya can also encourage families to have far more children. And the status of women may not be quite as high as in the UK, so women often feel that their main role in society is having children. And as a consequence, they have many. So those are reasons why the birth rates are high in Kenya. So why are the death rates high? Why are few people getting into the older age groups? Well, partly it's because many people at a young age won't have been immunized and therefore they're less likely to survive into old age. There's also no pension in Kenya, so people have to work through their whole life. There's no NHS to provide healthcare, so when they get older, they're more likely to get ill and potentially won't live as long. And nor are there any care facilities to look after people in their older ages, also meaning it's likely they're not going to live as long as they would in the UK. So these are the kind of points I should have seen you explain in your answer, and maybe 7 of them would have been a very strong answer to this question. So let's have a little look at question 2. This is a straightforward describe question. There are no reasons required for why China's got the changing population. The key thing here is to write an answer that's quite quick. Some people can take a long time to answer these questions. So I would always start looking at maybe where the biggest changes have been had. So I would have said in the old age group over 60, China had 8% in 1982. This has increased to 27% in 2050, which is an increase in 19%. What you then might have done is said in the opposite age group, with the young, the 0 to 14, they had 34% in 1982. This has dropped to 16% in 2050, which is a drop of 18%. Now, for the final age group, 15 to 59, 1982 they had 58%. This increased to 67% in 2000, which is an increase of 9%, but then has fallen since, and by 2050 will be down to 57%, which overall will have been a drop of 1%. So you've gone through each of the 3 age groups. You've done it quite quickly. You've just told me the first number, the last number, and what the difference was. The only time you didn't do that would be the middle age group, because there's actually an increase between these 2 years, and then it then falls away over the next preceding period of time. Right, let's have a look at question B. Now, question B requires you to understand that China's population structure is clearly indicating a drop in the number of young people, a slight drop in the number of working age people, but the big issue is this big increase in the number of elderly. Now, you don't need to repeat those statistics because you'll have already done that in part A. So what are the kind of problems China's going to have? Well, a big increase in the elderly is first of all going to mean they're going to have to find more taxes to pay for the increase in pensions, because more elderly is going to mean more pensions. Elderly are more likely to use healthcare, so therefore they're going to have to increase the amount of healthcare they're providing as a country, which will also mean they're probably going to have to train more doctors to work in the healthcare system. They're going to have to build more care homes because more elderly are going to need more care. They might have to encourage people to work longer to deal with the fact that there are far more elderly, and therefore stopping people retiring at such a young age will keep the number of people working longer. Why? Because if we look at the number of working people, it's expected to drop. So what we need to say there is that this is going to mean less jobs get filled. This also means that China is no longer as attractive because it doesn't have such a big working population, so businesses might not set up there. And mainly, there's going to be a tax problem because less working people means less taxes. So they might have to increase the tax rates. Finally, the drop in the number of young means they're going to have a workforce problem in the future because there's fewer young becoming adults to work. And they might also have to close things like schools and universities because there's less young people in the future. Okay, so lots of points, 6 marks. You'd be trying to make maybe 7 of those points that I mentioned, with answer mainly focusing on this big increase in elderly, but also talking about the changes in the other age groups as well and how that's going to affect China in the future. Right, in our last answer, we are looking at the UK. Now, don't get deceived. Your answer doesn't have to be about the UK. It can be about any country, but really, it doesn't really matter which country you talk about, or as long as your answer starts by talking about a developed country. So had you gone with the map and said in the UK, what you're then having to do is just tell me, why are there more people in different areas? So let's have a look at down here in the southeast of England. Why are there more people here? Well, because this is where the capital is. There's more jobs in London, so more people are attracted there for jobs. Also, this area is nearer Europe, which is over here, where France is, which means there's a lot more trade here. You could have told me that south of England is much flatter, and it's easier to get around in these areas and build in these areas, and because it's flatter. That's the same reason why there's more people in the central belt, because it's a much flatter area. You might have done the reversal of that and actually said that there's fewer people in the north of Scotland because it's quite mountainous and it's difficult to get around. There's fewer people in Scotland overall because it's much colder, so people are less attracted to live in colder climates. You might have also said it's much wetter in the further north you go, and therefore there's less people living in wetter climates. You might have said there's more people on the coasts because it's access to trade, but also the fishing industry, or because people like to live near the sea. You might have also said there's more people by the coast because the climates tend to be milder in coastal areas. So really what I'm saying is any knowledge that you have about why lots of people live in certain areas of planet Earth and why they don't live in other areas, most of those points actually apply to the United Kingdom or to any country. So you didn't have to be specific. As long as you're picking out areas of the UK and giving some possible reasons why there are more or less people. You don't actually have to know if those reasons are correct, as long as your reasons are accurate. One thing I would say about your answer here is you want to make sure you offer 5 answer points just to guarantee if you've done a reversal that you're still picking up full marks. So a reversal would be saying, for example, there are lots of people living in the flat areas of southern England because it's easy to build on flat land. There are very few people living in the North Scotland because it's mountainous and difficult to build on steep land. Now, whilst those sound like 2 different points, they are just opposites and you would only get 1 mark for that. So be wary of answers where you do reversals. Okay, now go to the document where you type your feedback and think about each of the answers you wrote, have a look at my suggestions and write some comments about what you would look to do if you were to do these questions again.